Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go.
Now all of us understand the importance of optional subject in overall scheme of UPSC Civil Services examination. And if you're confused about which optional subject to choose, how to find the best teachers and academic support for your optional papers, and above all, how to prepare for the same during these difficult times, Rouse IAS has best solution for your optional subject related problems. We are conducting optional orientation sessions on 22nd and 29th of May 2021, in which you can learn from the Rouse IAS teachers about how to prepare for the optional subjects and how are we going to help you in scoring your best in the mains examination. The optional batches are starting from 4th of June and 5th of July 2021 via live online classes. Consider this as a call to all of those who wish to completely cover the optional subject by December 2021. This will ensure timely coverage of optional subject, and then you can focus your attention completely on prelims from January or February 2022 and keep revising the optional subject till you appear for the mains examination. Rouse IAS is offering guidance for political science, public administration, history, sociology, geography, economics, and psychology from Delhi, Jaipur, and Bangalore centers. In the description of the video, there is a link which you can use to register yourself for the orientation for the respective optional subject session. We at Rouse IAS are committed to give you the best guidance and academic support to excel in civil services examination. Join the orientation and kickstart your mains optional subject preparation from a team of best teachers in the arena.
Hello everyone, we are going to take up discussion on today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition dated 12th May 2021. Incidentally, there is not much news in today's newspaper, and whatever is there to be discussed from examination perspective has been discussed already in the previous DNS. So today's DNS basically will be kind of revision if you have missed discussion on those topics. These are the articles important from the exam perspective in today's newspaper. There is an article on page number 8, Maratha quota, Uddhav writes to President. Supreme Court has recently ruled that the state government do not have the power to provide such quotas. So the Maratha quota given by the state government of Maharashtra was declared unconstitutional. Now the Chief Minister is looking for ways and means to get it done. He's writing to the Prime Minister, he's writing to the President, but that's not important. What's important for the exam is to understand the judgment why Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional. And that was explained very clearly by illustrious Vaibhav sir. In case you have missed it, please go through this discussion.
So, a 5-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court yesterday struck down the Maharashtra law granting reservation to Maratha community in admissions as well as in government jobs in the state. The 5-judge constitution bench was unanimous in its declaration that the Maharashtra law is unconstitutional, which had breached the limit put forward by a special verdict known by the name of Indra Sahni ruling. Now, if you look at GS Paper 2 syllabus, under the Polity and Governance section, you will find Indian Constitution, historical underpinnings, evolution, features, amendments, significant provisions, and basic structure to the Constitution of India. And so you will see how when we discuss the details of this proceeding in the Supreme Court, we will actually go through some of the very important provisions of the Constitution of India, and specifically the recent amendment to the Constitution of India, the 102nd Amendment Act. So we'll start by first discussing the Maratha law, how it was challenged in Bombay High Court, and then the challenge to the Bombay High Court's judgment in the Supreme Court of our country, and what are the 3 important observations which has been made by the Supreme Court. So let us now begin the discussion. So this matter of reservation of Marathas goes back 10 to 20 years in time. But we are going to trace back its genesis in 2018, where Maharashtra government enacted a law to provide reservation to Maratha community. In November 2018, the Maratha community was given the reservation under the Maharashtra State Socially and Educationally Backward Act. The special act was sanctioned by Maharashtra State Backward Class Commission and approved in both Assembly as well as the Council of the state. Now, the emphasis on legislation was to give reservation under SEBC, or socially and educationally backward classes, a legal validity. Of course, this reservation to the Maratha community took the overall reservation in Maharashtra above the limit of 50% which was set up in Indra Sahni judgment. And so, subsequently, it was challenged in Bombay High Court. It was challenged through a public interest litigation, and in the judgment, Bombay High Court upheld the reservation, but it did modify the amount of reservation which was given in education and jobs to the Maratha community. So while the act envisaged the reservation of 16% to Maratha community in both education as well as in jobs, the Bombay High Court order reduced it to 13% in case of jobs and 12% in case of education. But then, in September 2020, the Maratha reservation confronted another legal hurdle as the Supreme Court stayed its implementation and referred the case to Chief Justice of India for a larger bench. And this is what the judgment has come yesterday, where the Supreme Court has struck down the Maharashtra law. So when the full order of the Supreme Court will become available, a lot of reviews and the articles will appear in the Hindu newspaper. And so accordingly, we will cover this topic. But as of now, the details we have are about three main issues on which the argument took place in the Supreme Court. And so we are going to look specifically into these three matters. And the first issue which the Supreme Court dealt in yesterday's judgment was whether or not it is the right time to revisit the landmark Indira Sahni ruling of 1992. So for all of those who are beginners in their preparation must understand that Indira Sahni is one of the most important Supreme Court judgments as far as polity and governance is concerned. Now the details of Indira Sahni ruling is a discussion in itself, but we are going to keep ourselves limited to the issues and the points of the Indira Sahni ruling which are applicable to the reservation being provided to socially and educationally backward classes. But if we talk about generally, the Indira Sahni judgment paved the way for reservation to other backward classes or OBCs in our country. And it created a system of creamy layer, and since it provided a reservation to OBC community which was on top of what existed for SCs and STs, it capped the total reservation which can be provided in our country to 50%. And if any other state government tries to breach this 50% limit on reservation, whether in jobs or in education, it is challenged in High Court and Supreme Court because it violates the landmark Supreme Court judgment of Indira Sahni ruling. And so the first thesis on which the Maharashtra law was challenged was that it violates the Indira Sahni judgment. Because the Indira Sahni judgment, which upheld the Mandal Commission report and provided reservation to OBC, laid down two important precedents. First, it said that the criteria for group to qualify for reservation should be both social and educational backwardness. And second, that there is a limit to which a state can provide reservation, and that limit is 50%. The Indira Sahni judgment also said that under certain exceptional circumstances, this 50% limit can be breached, but those exceptional circumstances have to be well defined, and we'll go into that as well. And so now we can clearly understand why Maharashtra law has been struck down, because the Maratha quota exceeds 50% ceiling put by the Indira Sahni judgment. And it is specifically because of this reason the Maharashtra government requested Supreme Court that Indira Sahni judgment must be reviewed. Now the time has come that we review this 28-year-old judgment, because it puts arbitrary ceiling on the amount of reservation which can be provided by a state. Because according to the Maharashtra government, there is no scientific evidence to suggest that why a limit of 50% should be put as a ceiling on the reservation. But in unanimous opinion yesterday, the court held that there is no need to revisit the case. The court said that the 50% ceiling, although an arbitrary determination by the court in 1992, is now constitutionally recognized, and there is no need as of now to review this 50% limit. So now it was clear to Maharashtra government that you cannot challenge this 50% limit. So if you cannot challenge this 50% limit, you will go for another clause of Indira Sahni judgment which said that the 50% limit can be breached under exceptional circumstances. And so the court, on the request of Maharashtra government, looked into whether the Maratha quota law falls under the exceptional circumstances contemplated by the constitutional bench in Indira Sahni. The court also looked into the Maharashtra State Backward Commission report that the Maharashtra government had relied on to see if a case can be made out for the exceptional circumstances. The state government's argument was that since the population of backward class is 85% and the reservation limit is only 50%, an increase in reservation limit would qualify as an exceptional circumstances or extraordinary need. But all 5 judges disagreed with this argument as well. The court insisted that Marathas are dominant forward class and they form the part of mainstream of national life. And so the above situation is not an extraordinary situation where they need to be provided reservation by breaching the 50% upper limit put by Indra Sahni judgment. It is not for the people like Marathas. And then finally, all the 5 judges of the bench decided also on the state's power to identify socially and educationally backward classes and the applicability of 102nd Constitutional Amendment. So we know that the Constitution 102nd Amendment Act 2018 gives constitutional status to National Backward Classes Commission or National Commission for Backward Classes. The amendment on the same hand also gives President powers to notify backward classes. And so several states had requested or raised the question on the interpretation of the amendment and argued that it curtails their own powers. But the bench unanimously upheld the constitutional validity of 102nd Amendment Act, and the Supreme Court finally held that the final say in regard to inclusion or exclusion lies firstly with the President and thereafter in case of modification or exclusion from the list initially published with that Parliament. And in the task of identification of SEBCs, the President shall be guided by the commission set up under Article 338B, and its advice shall be sought by the state in regard to policies that might be framed by it. If the commission prepares a report concerning matters of identification, such matter has to be shared with the state government, which is bound to deal with it in accordance with the provisions of Article 338B. However, the final determination will be ultimately done by the President. And so, in totality, the Supreme Court not only cancelled the law but also held the Bombay High Court judgment as ultra vires the Indra Sahni ruling. So in essence, now the Maratha quota verdict has been given for the time being, which means that there is not going to be any reservation for Marathas in Maharashtra.
There is an article on page number 13, What's Happening in Jerusalem? The tension between Israel and Palestine has escalated yet again. The discussion as to why the tension has increased, what's the importance of Jerusalem, and the background of the conflict between Israel and Palestine has been discussed very eloquently by our magical Vaibhav sir. If you want to recap the discussion, here it is.
Into 1200 words essay. Let us now move on to the next news. So the 2 news items appear on page number 6 and page number 13 respectively. On the edge as a form of column on page number 6, and over 300 Palestinians hurt in Jerusalem holy site clash appears on page number 13. So Israel police has fired a lot of tear gases, stun grenades and rubber bullets on stone throwing Palestinians at a flashpoint in Jerusalem's holy site. And for all those people who read the newspapers regularly, must have encountered the news related to Israel and Palestine conflict at least once every week. But since the problem is so complicated that the people who are the beginners into the preparation, the new aspirants, do not have a clear-cut understanding into the full historical context of Israel and Palestine dispute. And to be able to understand the progression appearing in the newspaper every day, you have to have a clear-cut idea as to what is the underlying cause, and which is what we are going to understand today. We are going to understand the historical context which has led to one of the world's most long-lasting and violent disputes among 2 nation groups. But not just that, even for the prelims examination, the map locations related to the Middle East and Israel-Palestinian conflict is very, very important. For example, in 2015, UPSC asked, the area known as Golan Heights sometimes appears in the news in the context of the events related to, and which one of the following countries of Southwest Asia do not open to the Mediterranean Sea? And so the answer of both these questions you will get through the discussion we are going to have now. And so in order to be able to understand what is happening right now, we'll have to go back in history to the time when there was extreme persecution of Jews, which resulted in the migration of Jews from Europe and various other parts of the world to Palestine, which led to the passage of UN resolution, which were followed by 2 important wars which were fought by Israel and Arabian countries, 1948 Arab-Israel War and Israel's 6-Day War. So now the current map of Israel and Palestine, which you see on Google Map or on World Map today, is something which did not exist 100 years ago. Because 100 years ago, there were very few Jews who lived in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. Most of them had already migrated to various European cities and countries. But the problem was that wherever Jews went, they had to face extreme persecution both from Muslims as well as from Christians. And hence a movement emerged among Jews living in European countries which took up the cause of persecution and talked about escaping this persecution. It actively talked about creation of a state solely or only meant for Jews. And this particular movement came to be known as Zionist movement. So basically Jews were persecuted in European countries. They decided they will gather, unite and move to a location on earth where they will establish their own state which will be just for them. And the place which was identified by them was Palestine. And so once it was decided that Palestine will be the place where they will set up their own country, they started to migrate. But the question arises, how could this migration take place? Now they could migrate because of special situation which was created as a result of World War I. If you know the context of World War I, you know that as a result of it, the Ottoman Empire, which controlled the most of the region of the Middle East, disintegrated as a result of World War I. And as the settlement of World War I, the administration of the Palestinian region was handed over to the British people. And you can see the Palestine in the red color marked over here, and you can see that under British, French and Russian protection. And this particular arrangement where British, French and Russian governments decided to trifurcate the whole region among themselves is known as Sykes-Picot Agreement. So two things happened simultaneously in favor of Jews. The disintegration of Ottoman Empire, an empire which claimed to be the protector of the Muslims. The existence of such an empire would have prevented the inflow of Jews to this particular region because it was controlled by a very, very powerful Ottoman Empire which disintegrated in 1915 to 16. And at the same time, the territory Palestine, which was identified under the Zionist movement will be the place where all the Jews will migrate, fell under the British occupation, and Britishers since the beginning were quite sympathetic to the cause of the Jews' protection and their persecution. But as soon as the World War ended, and a new set of governments started to form in Europe, another factor was added into the migration or giving a big boost to the migration of Jews from Europe to the Palestine, which was emergence of a lot of fascist governments across Europe. One of them you know is Hitler, another one was Mussolini, and so what you have across Europe is wide level of persecution which extended well beyond Germany. And so as more and more fascist and anti-Jews government rose up in Europe, the persecution of Jews reached unprecedented level not even seen during medieval times. And this resulted into the kind of migration which was never seen by Jews in the history. So now, starting with Zionist movement as reason number 2, disintegration of Ottoman Empire and occupation of Palestine by Britishers, and third is that now you have fascist regime which were actively persecuting Jews, which was unseen before. And so as a combined result of all these factors, the more and more number of Jews started arriving in a very, very small territory of Palestine, which was earlier mainly populated by Arab Muslims. And so what you have till 1947 is that this Palestinian territory is just receiving more and more number of Jews flowing in from Germany, from Sweden, from France, and from various other places in Europe, and they are just arriving and making up their own homes inside Palestine because this particular territory is controlled by British. They are allowing the people to come in. But by the time 1947 and 1948 came, a massive alarm was raised by local Arabs because now they were concerned about the increasing population of Jews, and they started an armed militant movement against the in-migrants or the Jews. And so this of course resulted in a retaliation from Jewish side, and this led to a lot of violence in the one particular year from 1947 to 48. But now it is 1947-48 and World War II has already ended. And now the Britishers had made up their mind to vacate the Middle East, including the Palestinian region. And so they decided to establish a proper state which the world would recognize as Israel, or nation state for Jewish people. And hence United Nations Security Council passed a resolution in which voted to split the earlier Palestinian region into 3 states. One Arab state, another one Jewish state, and the third one would be the Jerusalem city. And so this UN resolution was passed in 1947, and this resolution is known by the name of UN Resolution number 181. And so now is the time to understand how the map of Palestine changed after this particular resolution. So you can clearly see that there are three colors in this map. Blue denotes the Jewish regions, pinkish orange color denotes the Arab regions, and the yellow one is international city of Jerusalem. So this was the condition starting 1948. And so this was the first time when the boundaries were actually drawn in the state of Palestine. So earlier what you had was complete Palestine owned and possessed and populated by Arabs. But after the resolution, what you have is a trifurcation of the same state into three parts. You can see clearly that Jews were given a lot of territory and Arabs were made limited to just the orangish areas. And so this was the first time when the Jews got the legal right, recognition from across the world to make up their own home state or home nation. So as you can totally understand, it's quite commonsensical what would have been the reception of this UN resolution. It was wholeheartedly accepted by Jews because since 100 years there was a demand among the Jews for their own home state, which they finally got through UN resolution number 181. But as far as Arabs are concerned, they completely rejected the UN resolution. It's not difficult to think why the response was such, because the earlier territory which completely belonged to them, 50%, more than 50% of that was given to Jews. And so they not only rejected the UN resolution, but at the same time they said that any further talks would not be entertained and we are going to fight it back and take it away from the Jews. And so here now what you have is genesis of one of the world's most cluttered and disputed territories. When the Arabs rejected the United Nations resolution, they also promised with each other that they are going to win back the areas which have been given to the Jews, which resulted in a lot of wars. But we are going to keep ourselves limited to 1948 Arab-Israel war and Israel's Six-Day War, because these are the two wars which have resulted into drastic changes in the map of the Israel and Palestine, and these are the locations which are frequently asked in UPSC Prelims examination, and through this discussion you will understand the importance of each and every territory. So in 1948, following the declaration of the State of Israel, the group of Arab nations known as Arab League decided to intervene on behalf of their Palestinian brothers by ordering their troops and military to marching into the areas of Palestine, especially those areas which were given to the Jews. Overall, the war was quite prolonged, but Israel emerged victorious because it not only retained its own mandate, it not only retained the territories which were allocated to it through UN resolution, but it was also able to capture around 60% of the territory which was given to the Arab people. So now after the end of this war, the Jews extended their area of control within Palestinian region. And so for next 10 to 15 years, things remained almost the same until in 1967 when Israel fought Six-Day War with its surrounding neighbors, which was actually started by Israel because Israel had this kind of premonition that the neighboring states are going to attack it. And so Israel started conducting preemptive strikes on Egypt, Syria and Jordan. And the interesting outcome of the war was not just that it defeated the combined armies of Egypt, Syria and Jordan, but Israel also managed to get control over some of the most strategically important points in Egypt, Syria and Jordan, which would then go a long way in defending Israel in future. So for example, it captured completely Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip. It took away Golan Heights, which are located over here, from Syria, and then it took West Bank, which can be seen marked in the blue color over here, and East Jerusalem from Jordan. So before the beginning of the war, Israel was just limited to the area which I am shading in blue color. It did not have Gaza Strip, it did not have Sinai Peninsula, it did not have West Bank, it did not have Syrian region of Golan Heights, which are very, very important strategically to protect Israel from Syria. But after the war ended, the Israel had access to Suez Canal through Sinai Peninsula. It completely controlled West Bank, Gaza Strip and also the Golan Heights. Now of course the current map of Israel does not show Sinai Peninsula as a part of Israel, and so that is because Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt in response to Egypt becoming the first Muslim country to recognize the existence of Israel as a formal state. So that was like a quid pro quo. You recognize us and we'll give back your territory to you. But it has held on, stuck to the other territories even now. It still controls Gaza Strip and West Bank. It still controls most of the Jerusalem. Now, whenever you read the news about Israel and Palestine, this is the one term because of which the news appears, and that is called the settlements of Israeli people in Palestine. So, what are these settlements? Of course, the Jewish people are settling in this particular region since more than 80 years now. And so, what is this new stuff known as settlements? So, settlements are basically civilian establishments for Jews, but they are known as settlements. There is a particular term, settlement, is used only for those colonies which are built on land occupied by Israel after 1967 war. So, if you make a house or a home or a colony inside this particular region, there is no trouble. But we know that in 1967, Israel occupied and started controlling the West Bank as well. And so, what Israel does is that it comes up with new colony here, expelling the Arabs from that particular region. And this has seen a continuous upswing in past 10 years, especially with the election of Mr. Netanyahu, who has been extremely nationalist in his outlook and approach towards the Arab people. So now this is a clear violation of UN resolution, because the UN resolution limited the Jews only to the region which was allocated to them. But now these Jewish people have started to make their homes inside the Arabian territories as well. And so now what you see on the screen is a gradual transformation of Israel's ethnicity in terms of the occupation. And so the light green color in the dark background shows the continuous reduction in the area populated by Arabs, and you can see a drastic decline after 1960, because then in 1970 onwards Israel's national government started to take up the colonies earlier settled by Arab people, expelled them because they have brute force on the ground, and now they are making up territories, colonies and occupations inside the Palestinian lands. So these settlements have led to a lot of violence in this particular region. So that is the reason number one because of which we hear the news related to Israel and Palestine. Now the reason because of which in last 10 days Israel has appeared in the newspaper is because of the clashes taking place at Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third holiest site in Islam. And it sits on a plateau which is also the holiest site for Jews, who refer to it as the Temple Mount, because it was the location of biblical temples. Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 AD with only the western wall remains. And the mosque was of course built much later. And so what you have right now, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then you have a wall which is the holiest site for Jews. And in recent years, groups of religious and nationalist Jews escorted by Israeli police have started to visit the compound or this campus in greater numbers, and they have started to hold prayers in defiance of the rules which was signed in 1967. Now, Palestinians view the frequent visit by Israelis as an attempt to ignite violence. The Palestinian view is that more and more Israelis will start visiting, and they will eventually take over the control over their one of the holiest mosques across the world, which is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is also one of the only few places still not controlled by the Israeli people. Because this particular location containing both Al-Aqsa Mosque and the wall is under the custody of neighboring country Jordan. The site is open to tourists during certain times, but only Muslims are allowed to pray there, and the western wall is the holiest site where the Jews can pray. And now, since the Jewish police has started to visit this particular region, the Palestinians and the Arabs are now increasingly concerned about the increasing control of the Israel on their holiest site.
On the economy page, you have an article on microfinancial institutions. Microfinancial institution has been under tremendous stress because of the present wave of COVID-19. A detailed discussion as to what are microfinancial institutions and what are their present condition and what are the ways and means in which RBI's help is being sought, that has been discussed very clearly by Jatin sir. In case you have missed the discussion or you want to see it again, here Jatin sir in your service.
Closer by the US or going into defense alliances with the US, as you can see in the case of Quad, has actually irritated many nations and most importantly the China. With this, now we move on to the next article. This article is related to a recent upheaval which was seen in the case of microfinance institutions and the credit crunch, including the issue of debt faced by them. Microfinance institutions have flagged rural borrowers' distress to RBI. So, rural borrowers are the majority customers of MFIs and they are under the distress because of the pandemic. This topic is relevant for your prelim examination, including the facts and trend of MFIs, what they are, including the definitions and their components. For mains perspective, this issue could be asked regarding the MFIs and their relevance in the Indian economy, especially the rural economy. The context of the article says that because of falling lendings from the microfinance institutions in the rural areas because of the pandemic in the country has actually impacted the rural household more than the previous year. So the situation in the current year is far more severe than what it had been in the previous year when the pandemic was actually taking place in the country. The MFIs or the microfinance institutions representative have asked the central bank, that is the Reserve Bank of India, to grant forbearance for the borrowers, that is the rural borrowers, and provide some kind of flexibilities to the institutions as well. Now, the question arises is what are MFIs, why we need them, some basic details and background on that. And we will take them one by one. The first question is why do we need MFIs in India? Well, India is a country which lack financial inclusion for the poor. The second being that it will meet up the demands of the vulnerable sections, including women, children, old age, transgenders, people with disability, and many others. It will also help the MSMEs or micro, small, and mini enterprises for their day to day needs. For example, a small pickle manufacturing unit or a small micro food processing unit may require a small amount of fund in order to improve upon their packaging. So they can approach MFIs for that needs. And lastly, MFIs can also help in the development of rural areas in India. MFIs in India mostly act as NGOs or a registered society or as a trust under Section 25 of companies and as non-banking finance companies. Previously, Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus of Bangladesh was credited with laying the foundation of modern MFIs with the establishment of Grameen Bank in Bangladesh in the year 1976. So Muhammad Yunus was a pioneer who came up with this idea and actually revolutionized MFIs and small saving instruments in Bangladesh. Going by the definitions of MFIs, these are those institutions which have microfinance as a main operation. Institution here means they are working as a separate entity. MFIs cannot be run by a single individuals. So it is not a kind of a business as such. MFIs are regulated by RBI, so this is the key word. This can be asked as a factual question in your prelims. As per the RBI guidelines, MFIs is defined as a non-deposit taking NBFC. What is NBFC? Non-banking finance companies. And they fulfill the following conditions. So these are the following conditions which should be met in order to create or in order to start an MFI. The minimum net owned funds of 5 crore rupees. For NBFC MFIs registered in the northeastern, it is as low as 2 crore rupees. And the second condition is that not less than 85% of its loan are the nature of qualifying assets. Now, what are these qualifying assets? Let us see in the following discussion. The qualifying assets shall mean a loan which satisfy the following conditions. Now, all these conditions which are mentioned here should be satisfied in order to qualify 85% of the lendings under the MFIs. The loans disbursed by the NBFC MFI to a borrower with a rural household income or annual income less than 1.25 lakh. So any rural household whose annual income, irrespective whether there is one person earning or the entire family is earning, should be less than 1.25 lakh. It simply means that they should be earning around 10,000 rupees per month. And if it is in the case of urban and semi-urban household, the income should be less than 2 lakh rupees. So they can provide loans to these kind of entities and could qualify for qualifying assets. The loan amount does not exceed in any case 1.25 lakh per borrower. So this is the maximum amount they can lend to a particular borrower. The loan extended without the collateral, so you need not to pay a collateral. So those students who are new and do not know what collateral is, it is a kind of an asset which you have to submit to a bank in order to avail a loan. For example, if you are buying a home loan from a bank, you have to put your legal papers or the property papers with the bank, and that property paper is nothing but a collateral. So in case you default on your loan, the property can be sold off by the bank. This is also known as mortgage functioning. The aggregate amount of loans given for income generation should be less than 50% of the total loan given by the MFI. So when an MFI is trying to give a loan in order to generate an income of a family or a particular person, for instance, providing them a kind of self-employment or a small business, that kind of loan should be at least 50% of the total loans given. So if this year they have given a loan of 50 crore rupees, at least 25 crore rupees should be given for income generation schemes or income generation initiative. And lastly, a loan is repayable on weekly, fortnightly, monthly installment as per the choice of the borrower. Now this is also a key word, choice of the borrower. It means the person who is taking the loan can have this choice to pay back on the weekly, fortnightly or monthly installments about the loan they have actually taken up. So these are the 5 conditions that should be met in order to get a good qualifying asset status and become a part of NBFC MFIs. In India, microfinance institutions operate through 2 different channels. So these are the 2 different functionings or methods through which MFIs are working in India. First one being the self-help group and bank linkage program. Under this, bank-led microfinance channel was created and it was initiated by NABARD in 1992. What is NABARD? Well, NABARD is nothing but a national bank for agriculture and rural development. It was created in order to improve the rural condition and to provide rural development. Rural Infrastructure Development Fund, which is also functioning under NABARD, is a kind of fund in which all those amount of money which has not been lended under the priority sector initiative is deposited. The women in the villages are encouraged to form a group of around 10 to 15 people. The members contribute their savings in the group periodically, and from these savings, small loans are provided. So outsiders are not provided money out of it. The self-help groups are provided with bank loan generally to form income generation purposes. So this is a basic criteria for which loans are actually disbursed. The second route which is functioning in India is microfinance institution. Well, this is more like an organized sector. The first one was based on the self-help groups, small groupings, including small groups of women. They are collecting the money themselves, they are saving it for themselves and in fact lending for the other members. So it is a simple case. Assume that there are 10 women. Each of them have contributed 5,000 rupees that month. Together they have contributed 50,000 rupees, and one of the member is actually aspiring for a 50,000 rupees loan. So what they will do, they will provide that loan to that particular member of the group, and in all this process there will be a help provided by the external entity, and that external entity is nobody but the NABARD. In the second group, which is also the organized one, institutions which have microfinance as their main operations are known as MFIs. So these are the institutions which have basic function of lending in a small amount. Microfinance institution does not mean that you can go and take a car loan or you can go or take a home loan from them. What you will do, you will go there as a poor person and aspire for small loans up to 1.25 lakh for your basic purposes or even for starting a self-employed businesses. The mode through which these institutions lend money to the people or the borrower is joint liability group. Now what is this? Well, joint liability group is an informal group comprising 5 to 10 individual members who come together for the purpose of availing a bank loan either individually or through a group mechanism against a mutual guarantee. Now what happens in this? Understand that there are 10 people and they want to start a small business, let's say a small restaurant around a highway. They are part of the rural economy. They want to open a small dhaba or a small highway restaurant. So what they do, they approach this MFI institution or this MFI organization, and they say that we are, as a group, as an informal group, want to have 1 lakh rupee of loan because we want to start a small dhaba on the highway. And they will provide a mutual guarantee that in case one of the member does not pay, the other would come up and repay the loan back to the MFI. So this is a kind of functioning which is available in this second type of mode in the economy. So these are the two modes through which funding is provided in India from MFIs.
This is the lead article from page number 6. Evaluate the Ladakh crisis. Keep China at bay. The author has given certain suggestions as to how India can tackle China. Regarding China, there are 3 broad areas that you need to understand. One is the nature of conflict and the position at the border where conflict has been escalated. Secondly, you need to understand the kind of threat that China can pose, especially in the context of two-front war that we talk about, when China and Pakistan together at the same time will become hostile. India will have to have fight at the two fronts. And thirdly, given this threat, what preparation India requires and how India can tackle China. All these 3 aspects have been discussed by our magical illustrious Vaibhav sir previously. I'm just appending that here. In case you need to brush up with this topic, you can go through this discussion clip.
Let us go through some of the important map locations which have been in news in last year. Starting with Depsan Plain, which are very high altitude plain at the northwest portion of the disputed Aksai Chin region of Kashmir, divided into India and Chinese administered portions across the LAC. Now it is important because from here, Chinese have a line of sight extending to Siachen Glacier. Both India and Pakistan claim sovereignty over the entire Siachen Glacier region, as you know. And Depsang Plains and Siachen Glacier are just 88.6 kilometers apart. Then the next important location is Galwan Valley, Hot Spring region, Pangong So Lake, Shyok River, Pangong So Lake and its 8 fingers. These are nothing but the spurs ending into Pangong So Lake. And so there are 8 spurs or 8 fingers, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. And this is the site of confrontation as India and China have different understanding of where the line of actual control passes through. India has maintained that LAC passes through finger 8, but China on the other hand says that LAC passes through finger 2. And it has been patrolling up to finger 4 region, mostly in light vehicles. The confrontation that took place in May happened at finger 5 area. And so these are the important map locations, and now let us move on to the contention made in today's editorial. So authors start the article by saying that any mention of two-front war evoked 2 kinds of contrasting opinions in India. On one side, we have an opinion of military, and on the other side, we have an opinion of political class. So as far as the view of the Indian military is concerned, it has always believed that a partnership between China and Pakistan and their joint attack is quite a real possibility, and we must develop capabilities to counter this challenge. So this is the view of Indian military. But on the other hand, political class has always thought otherwise. The political class in general, until very recently, has believed that a two-front threat is not a real possibility, is rather a hype created out of the friendship of China and Pakistan. They have argued that China has never intervened militarily in any of the India and Pakistan conflicts in the past. And since India has deep-rooted economic and diplomatic ties with China, which actually defend and rule out any armed conflict between the two countries simultaneously when India is going through a war with Pakistan. So these have been the 2 conflicting opinions. And since we know that in India, the military follows what political class believes, and hence as a result, India has always focused on Pakistan and the threats arising out from Pakistan. However, whenever India has forgotten that it has 2 enemies or antagonists from 2 sides, or it has let its guard down, it has paid heavily for it. Let's take the example of 1962 war. Indian government in 1962 believed that there is no threat from China, and the principal enemy or the principal threat was from Pakistan. But what happened in 1962? We know how Chinese troops advanced over Indian forces in Ladakh as well as across the McMahon line, and India was defeated decisively in that battle. On the other hand, whenever India has believed that two-front war is a real possibility and it has accounted for such a prospect, it has done well. And the best example is 1971 war. In 1971, we know and the role we played in the bifurcation of Pakistan. But at the same time, when we were fighting the war with Pakistan, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi understood the threats from China, and in order to deter China from attacking India at the same time when India was fighting war with Pakistan, she finalized Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation with the USSR. Of course, it was a significant deviation from India's previous position of non-alignment during Cold War, but the treaty was mainly targeted and caused by increasing Pakistani ties with China. So you can see that whenever India has discounted likelihood of a two-front war, it has gone against India, but whenever the central government has taken into account such a possibility, it has done well. But according to the authors, this has now changed because of the recent intrusions by China in May in various locations in Ladakh, and especially the violence that resulted from clashes between Indian Army and People's Liberation Army. These incidents have tilted the opinion of the political leaders. And now, Chinese military threat is more apparent and real. And because of this, and as a direct consequence of this, the two-front war situation has been actively being discussed at the central level. Now, according to the authors, even if the current India-China crisis on the border is resolved peacefully, China's military challenge will occupy greater attention of Indian military planners in the months and years to come. Now, why two-front war situation is being actively discussed is because the ceasefire violations along line of control has significantly increased in past 2 to 3 years, and at the same time, China is intruding into areas so far believed to be Indian territories. Also, there are reports that have indicated that Pakistan has moved 20,000 troops into Gilgit-Baltistan, which actually match the Chinese deployment in eastern Ladakh. So, what are the threats which emanate from China and Pakistan military links? So, if you want to understand the friendship of China and Pakistan in military sense, we know that China has always looked at Pakistan as counter to India's influence in South Asia. If you want to put down India, promote Pakistan. So that has always been a mainstay of philosophy of China's and Pakistan friendship. Not just that, over the years, the ties between the two countries have solidified and strengthened to a great extent. An indication of increasing military cooperation is the fact that China accounts for 73% of the total arms import of Pakistan between the period of last 4 years. Not just that, the two countries have recently concluded Shaheen 9, which was a Pakistan-China joint Air Force exercise. And strategic thinkers believe that it was meant to be a kind of preparation for a likelihood of a two-front war with India. And so, it would be prudent for India to be ready for a two-front threat. In preparing for this, the Indian military needs to realistically analyze how this threat could manifest itself and the type of capabilities that should be built up to counter it. So what needs to be done in a likely scenario of a two-front war? So of course, a straightforward answer would be to strengthen our military capabilities. According to strategic and military thinkers, around 60 combat squadrons are needed to deal with a serious two-front threat, which means an attack from China and Pakistan would require India to have at least 60 squadrons of Air Force. But the problem is this is double the number of squadrons currently with the Indian Air Force. And so obviously it is neither practical nor feasible to build a level of capability that enables independent war fighting on both the fronts. And so authors suggest some other ways to counter a likely two-front scenario. First is of course development of a doctrine with a close interaction with political leadership. Because any doctrine that is prepared without a political aim will not stand the test when it is actually to be executed. The second is the development of capabilities, which requires serious debate because we have just understood that in order to meet a real challenge simultaneously from China and Pakistan would require a significant increase in the defense budget as there is too much focus on traditional warfare. For example, when we talk about meeting the two front war scenario, we always think of acquiring aircraft, ships, tanks. And according to the author, the focus now needs to shift from these traditional warfare methods to the upcoming and emerging technologies such as robotics, artificial intelligence, cyber, electronic warfare. And according to the author, the right balance will have to be struck based on a detailed assessment of China Pakistan's war fighting strategies. Then the role played by diplomacy cannot be ignored because we have seen how diplomacy, especially by regional dominant players, can stop an upcoming war. For example, we all saw how Russia negotiated a deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And so, to begin with, New Delhi would do well to improve relation with its neighbors so as not to be caught in an unfriendly neighborhood given how Beijing and Islamabad will attempt to contain and constrain India in the region. And this has not been going well, especially if we consider our relation with Nepal and Bangladesh. The ties have been deteriorating. Then author lauds the Indian government's approach to cement the ties with the powers in West Asia. But the lacking area is the relation with Iran, which should be strengthened in order to ensure energy security. Then in the scenario of closing relationship between India and US, India should never forget its ties with Moscow, which could play a key role in diffusing the severity of regional gang up against India, as we have seen was done by USSR in 1971. And then according to the author, the emphasis on Quad is not quite well planned because after all Quad is a maritime group and India has a continental problem far away from the oceans. So if you want to counter China in South China Sea, that is a good strategy. But if you want to counter China and Pakistan in and around regions of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, we cannot rely on Quad. And then finally, we need to have a solid outreach to Kashmir and its people. Because in a likelihood of a two-front war with Pakistan and China, if the people of Kashmir are not approached timely, then that would be another problem to be sorted at the same time. And also from a long view perspective, political outreach to Kashmir aimed at pacifying the aggrieved citizens there would go a long way towards that end. So this was quite a holistic article, not only explaining what two-front war challenge is, but how India should be approaching this particular scenario.
You have the answer to yesterday's question of the day and today's question of the day on your screen. Please attempt the question and also try to attempt the DNS quiz on the eLearn platform. Take good care of yourself, be safe, come out only when it's absolutely necessary.